To the Sustainability Series program this evening, March 9th, 2010. This is the program entitled Discovering Your Carbon Footprint and How to Tread More Lightly. This is the fourth installment of the Sustainability Series, and the Sustainability Series is a group of programs that we've put together addressing topics of sustainable living and growth in Radnor Township. We want to create some dialogue on topics of sustainability, and therefore the Radnor Township EAC, the Radnor Conservancy, and the Radnor League of Women Voters have collaborated to bring you this program. My name is Brenda Gotanda, and I am chair of the Radnor Township EAC. And I'm going to get us kicked off tonight, and then we'll hear from a series of guest speakers on the topic of greenhouse gas emissions inventory and carbon footprint. A couple of the other programs that we've had already have been addressing green building, addressing alternative energy, and greening your own home, what residents can do. We're always open to suggested topics for future programs and would welcome them. We have a sign-up sheet, but if you're watching at home and you have suggestions for topics that you'd like us to consider, you can feel free to either email the Radnor Conservancy or send an email to the Township, and we'll get that and consider your ideas for future programs. So tonight's topic is discovering your carbon footprint and how to tread more lightly. We have a series of 3 presentations, and that'll be followed by a period of questions and answers if anyone has questions. We are open to taking questions during the presentation, but it's very important for you to speak into the microphone so that the viewers at home can hear you. So it just may work a little easier to have the questions at the end. Okay. So what we want to do tonight is share with you some information about greenhouse gas emissions that have been conducted locally here and provide both residents and businesses information on how to calculate your own carbon footprint and determine what impacts you may be having so that you can then take the next step perhaps and take some actions to reduce those impacts. There's certainly a lot of debate going on nationally and internationally regarding greenhouse gas emissions, and while that's getting all sorted out, what you're beginning to see is municipalities, corporations, and individuals all taking steps to evaluate their greenhouse gas emissions, prepare inventories, and then take action to actually reduce some of their greenhouse gases. They're not waiting for Washington to sort it all out. So what we have done here in Radnor Township is conduct our own emissions inventory. We'll give a presentation on that first, tell you a little bit about what we've done and why we've done it. It was completed last year. I will begin the presentation with some background information, and then I will turn it over to my colleague Josh Hilbert, who is Vice Chair of the Radnor Township EAC, and he'll give you the substance. He was really a remarkable asset in pulling the information all together for this inventory. He is president of an environmental consulting firm called GHR Consulting. So we're delighted to have him here tonight for this presentation. Next up, we'll hear from Tim Denny from Haverford Township. Haverford Township is a couple steps ahead of Radnor, and they have already completed an inventory and developed an action plan, and they're already implementing that action plan. So we'll hear from him how that's going, and perhaps he'll give us some tips here for folks who are working on the action plan in Radnor. Tim is the Director of Parks and Recreation and the Assistant Township Manager in Haverford Township. He heads up their green team, and interestingly, for those that are following the development of the old Haverford State Hospital, he's responsible for the development of the community parks portion of that. Finally, we're very honored to have with us tonight Andrew Kreider from US EPA, and he will walk us through how you calculate carbon footprint and then how you reduce your impacts. If you are a large multinational corporation, this can be a fairly sophisticated endeavor. We're not here to get all tied up in knots over it tonight. What Andrew will do is provide a simple way for you to calculate a footprint. So any individuals that are interested in doing that can easily put one together. Likewise, businesses can do that. And then if you're interested in more information and resources, Andrew can direct you to resources available at EPA. So we're looking forward to hearing that. Andrew is the Energy Star Program Manager at the Mid-Atlantic region for EPA, and he's responsible for assisting municipalities with climate change planning and other sustainability initiatives. And he is from Schuylkill Township. So, in order to get us started, I just wanted to go over a few of the basics to make sure that we're all on the same page. So here's a variety of questions that I thought we all better have the answers to before we delve too deeply into this topic. What are greenhouse gases? Why are they of concern? How do they relate to carbon? And what's a carbon footprint? So let's go briefly through that. I show up on the slide, what are greenhouse gases? They are these heat-trapping gases that prevent the heat from the sun that's entering our atmosphere from radiating back from the Earth out into space. So the reason why we can all live comfortably here are because the Earth has these greenhouse gases. So it's a good thing. It provides us with a layer of comfort and warmth. And I've listed up there what these greenhouse gases are. They include things like water vapor, carbon dioxide, methane, a variety of substances listed up there, and I have included a slide from EPA's website showing how it works. Okay, so if that's the case and they're a good thing, what's the problem and why are we talking about it? The concern is that some of our activities are increasing these greenhouse gases at such a rate that the concern is there's going to be a buildup of too much of the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and then it will intensify this greenhouse effect. So the concern is that our climate will get warmer. So some of the things that are listed up there are some of the concerns that you may hear about: global warming, climate change, extreme weather events, changes in precipitation, ecosystem impacts. Not going to talk about the science tonight. We're just, really want to talk about the greenhouse gas emissions. But there's plenty of information on EPA's website about that if you're interested. Other issues relate to energy security and independence, and the reason why is because the burning of fossil fuels creates greenhouse gas emissions. So if we are intensely using energy and needing oil from the Middle East or elsewhere, then it presents issues for energy security and independence. So you may hear those terms when you're hearing about greenhouse gas emissions. And then likewise, there are potential business risks associated with it. Even if a corporation or an entity is not regulated by EPA right now with regard to greenhouse gases, there are public perceptions about corporate sustainability. And nowadays, if you're a corporation and you're not thinking about it, there are risks to your business in sort of putting your head in the sand. So, greenhouse gases and carbon, how do they relate? Well, we just talked about those fossil fuels. We're talking about coal, oil, natural gas, these types of things. We burn them to generate electricity, to drive our cars, to heat and cool buildings, to power industry. And when those are burned, they release carbon dioxide, which is a greenhouse gas. And I just put one statistic up there. You may remember that from our green building program, that in the United States, buildings alone account for 38% of all the carbon dioxide emissions. So if we can get a handle on some of the efficiencies, the low-hanging fruit in buildings, that's going to be an easy way to reduce some of the carbon dioxide emissions. What is a carbon footprint? Andrew Kreider is really going to give you the detail on the answer to that question, but in general, it's the total measure of greenhouse gas emissions that are resulting from your activities. So you'll hear more from him about that. Okay, we're going to move right in now to a discussion of the Radnor Township greenhouse gas emissions inventory that was completed last year by the Radnor Township EAC. And if you are interested in more detail on this report than I provide here in summary form, you can find it on the Radnor Township website. You can click to Radnor Green, right on through to climate change, and it'll be there. So why did we do this? Well, in September 2007, the Radnor Township Board of Commissioners passed a resolution. They endorsed the U.S. Mayor's Climate Protection Agreement, calling upon cities and municipalities to join in establishing goals and strategies to reduce emissions of greenhouse gas emissions. So as the debate raged on at the federal level, there was really no agreement reached. The municipalities decided to move forward on their own. Lots of municipalities signed on to this and started to take action on their own. The Board of Commissioners in the resolution declared their intent to develop an action plan to limit Radnor's energy costs and greenhouse gas emissions, and asked the EAC to prepare an inventory and an action plan. They also authorized our membership in ICLEI, which is a nonprofit that provides technical resources to assist with the inventory process and action planning. So what ICLEI has done to assist communities in identifying and reducing their greenhouse gas emissions is they have developed this 5-step process that they recommend that you follow. First, conducting the inventory of your greenhouse gases, then establishing a emission reduction target, developing an action plan to achieve the target, implementing it, and then monitoring and reporting on your progress. So in Radnor, we've completed step 1. We're very proud of it. When you hear from Tim Denny, he's all the way down that list. So we have a lot to learn from him. Okay. All right, so the scope. This is very important. Regardless of your size, when you start out to do an inventory, you got to figure out what you're counting. Here, we decided to do a focused inventory that included only those things that we really could control. So we included things like municipal operations, township property, Radnor Township School District. We have a very good relationship with them. They have a lot of information available, so we coordinated with them. That was included. And then the facilities that receive public funding or services from the township. We did not include residential sources. Don't have a lot of control over that, although we're hoping to educate the residents. And we did not include commercial sources. However, at the time that we made this decision, we knew that the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, DVRPC, was also conducting an emissions inventory, a regional one that would include our township, and they were including those types of sources. So we excluded them, and we felt that we could rely on their inventory as needed to get a more comprehensive picture of what was going on in the township. This is just highlight of the process that we followed. We collected all the data on electricity use, natural gas use, fuel use, waste generation, and entered it into the ICLEI software. Josh did an amazing job at getting all of the information and then working through what was necessary to prepare the inventory. He'll talk a little bit about that. And we used 2005 as a baseline because we had a very robust data set at the time that seemed like the most robust data set that we had, and the DVRPC was using that as a baseline. So again, we could compare apples to apples, so it made sense. We used the ICLEI software to calculate the emissions from the data entered. You don't need fancy software to complete a greenhouse gas emissions inventory. It can be done with spreadsheets, but this was a nice software designed for municipalities doing this, and we found it advantageous to use. The 5 categories of sources that we looked at included those listed on the slide: the buildings, vehicles, public lighting, water, sewer, and waste. And the bottom line really is that if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. So this is the first step, is just measuring it and figuring out what we have. So I'm now going to turn it over to Josh, who will take you through what the results are of our survey. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you, Brenda. This slide is a summary of how much carbon dioxide equivalent the township emitted, as well as the cost of the energy that the township purchased in 2005. The chart on the left is the carbon dioxide equivalent, and that's basically the amount of greenhouse gases that the township emitted, and it's divided into four categories: buildings, waste, vehicles, and public lights. Public lights including street lights and traffic lights. Buildings would include the heating of this building here, the lighting in this building. Vehicles would be the gasoline and the diesel fuel that we use to fuel all of our township-owned vehicles. And the waste component is the amount of greenhouse gases emitted from our waste, the disposal of our waste in the township. So as you can see on the lower left, the carbon dioxide emitted, the greenhouse gases emitted from the township in 2005 was about 10,800 tons. To put that into a little bit of a perspective, my house, which I just did a carbon footprint on recently, was 12 tons. So it's quite a bit of carbon dioxide. And the cost of the energy that we purchased in 2005 was over $1.7 million. So now I'm going to go into each one of those components in a little bit more detail. Buildings, as you saw in that chart, were the single largest component of our emissions. They're also the largest component of our energy costs. About 5,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent could be attributed to our buildings. That's about almost half of our emissions. costing over $1.2 million. In the sources that we accounted for in our report, the Radnor Township School District, the school district accounted for 82% of those building emissions. The reason is that the Radnor Township School District has much more square footage than the Radnor Township, our buildings are here. So this being the largest of our buildings, Radnor Township School District has high schools, middle schools, elementary schools. So that's why that makes sense that they're 82% of the building total. The Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission estimates that the residential buildings in Radnor Township are estimated to be more than 25 times the municipal emissions that we have calculated. So what that means is that the residential component, which is the sum of everybody's home here in Radnor, is 25 times as much as the buildings that the township own. What that means to me is that that homeowners that are thinking about greening their own home or thinking about calculating their own carbon footprint shouldn't think that they're just a drop in the bucket. They're actually the largest component in the township, and that's why it's important that everybody think of their own home as the most important thing. And if everybody would do that, then the greening of our homes in Radnor could be an extremely effective way of reducing the township's carbon footprint. Here's a quick summary of the building emissions. You'll see that the largest bar there on the chart is the Radnor School District's electric use. That is the largest component of the carbon dioxide emissions. The vehicles in the township represent about 21% of our total emissions. Almost $400,000 in gasoline and diesel were spent in 2005. The two largest users in this chart that I have in the bottom are the trash trucks and the marked police cars. It might not be a surprise to you that the trash trucks average less than 3 miles per gallon, 22,000 gallons. And how about the marked police cars averaging less than 10 miles per gallon? That's not just a factor of what kind of vehicles they use, but it also takes into account how they drive them. They're not out there on a pleasure cruise. They have a lot of starting and stopping in town and whatnot. But some of the other vehicles are in here, and you'll see none of them are over 10 miles a gallon. This chart breaks it out in terms of what type of vehicles. The far right bar, the largest bar, are the school district's buses. They're the largest user or emitter in terms of tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. Next in line would be the township's utility vehicles, like garbage trucks. And the next one down would be the far left bar, are the Radnor Township's SUVs, which are, I guess, used by it'd be pickup trucks and utility vehicles, for instance, Parks and Rec. Public lighting accounts for 7% of our total emissions, although it does account for a bit more of our cost, almost $250,000 in electricity. Traffic, as I noted here, traffic signals, since the 2005 data, the traffic signals in town have been converted almost entirely to LEDs already. So I broke it out into the different types of lighting. There are street lights, there's traffic signals, and there's park lighting. Street lights account for the largest component of the carbon dioxide emissions at 500 tons and a cost of almost $180,000. Parks being the next largest one with 175 tons, and then followed by traffic signals. Since this 66 tons of traffic signals emissions in 2005, that number has surely come down because we've changed them to LEDs, but we don't have that data yet. And that's just a graphical representation of that previous data. Waste is our second largest component of greenhouse gas emissions. However, in 2005, the disposal of that waste, that means the tippage fees, were zero. So there was no cost associated with those fees. But they are In 2005, they were a large component of our emissions at almost 2,500 tons. This trash is incinerated, and the incineration of garbage, along with the amount of fuel that it takes to incinerate that garbage, that emits carbon dioxide, and that's and what that means is that if you can personally reduce your amount of garbage that leaves your house, you're reducing the amount of greenhouse gases. And even if we didn't burn that garbage, if we sent it to a landfill, that garbage would eventually turn into methane, which is also a greenhouse gas. So waste component is very important, and it's something that we can all take some responsibility for. This waste does actually include the waste of our residences. This is the only part of our report that has any data that comes from the homeowners. So that 2,500 tons includes our homeowner, the waste of our homeowners. In 2011, next year, we are expecting our tipping fees to be $250,000 because our Delaware County Solid Waste Authority has instituted some tipping fees now. So now it's going to be important not only to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, but to save on township costs to reduce our waste. And here's a graphical representation of that. I tried to add in some more data to put this in perspective. You can see that the trash trucks themselves, the exhaust from those trash trucks that go around our neighborhood, are a fairly small component, about 1/10 of the total emissions related to waste when you compare it to incineration. So, beginning to summarize this, why does it matter? Several important panels, international and in our own country, have determined that greenhouse gases cause climate warming. The Pennsylvania Climate Action Plan, that data in that plan indicates that Pennsylvania emits 1% of the world's man-made greenhouse gases. I found that to be astonishing. So that puts it in perspective that this is not, we're not just a drop in a bucket. We are a significant component. And most scientific associations agree that allowing climate change to happen is really not an option, and the impacts of climate change are very important, and they will happen in the United States and around the world. So the next steps, as Brenda had pointed out earlier on, in Radnor, we need to establish a target to which we hope to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and develop an action plan on how to achieve that. After that, we will be implementing the action plan, monitoring our results, and reporting on our progress. And then, of course, engaging the community in greenhouse gas emission reduction efforts. So it's not going to end at Radnor Township. This is just the beginning. We're going to then, through programs like this and other outreach efforts, hope to engage the homeowner and the businesses on how to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. Thanks. Come on in. Didn't want to leave you hanging. This one? Green tea.
Green tea.
Okay, thanks.
Came with a lot of props, expecting a live audience, can't you tell? We're live. That's right. Thanks for coming. Well, good evening. It's a pleasure to be here tonight with this series. And my name is Tim Denny. I'm from Haverford Township, right next door. So it's nice to be here in this beautiful building you have here in Radnor. I am here tonight to tell you how we do it, or how we're doing it. And I wish I knew, but we're trying. And I guess if I was to sum up what we're trying to do, it's almost like what you're trying to do in your own household. You know, you're trying to do what you can, what you think will work for you. You're trying to prioritize based on the way you live. But I think my message is almost anything that you can do is certainly a positive. And if you are able to think it through and match what you can do with the realities of your township, then you're that much further ahead. Does anybody here live in Haverford Township, other than these two over here, because I know they do? That's good. Well, I can trust them, so that's good. No one else does. Anybody here work in municipal government? Oh, you do. Where do you work? Here? Right here in Radnor? Okay. Well, then you'll understand some of what I'm saying then if you work in municipal government. What we did in Haverford Township was very similar to what Brenda and Josh just explained that you did in Radnor. We got a grant, and we did a year-long study of our inventory, and then from that, we made some decisions. One of the things that, I'll skip through this, was very educational for me, was to realize that local governments really are the ones at the forefront of all these things that are going on. There's a lot of good things going on. There's a lot of, Josh made reference to some of them, but one of the things, Washington, D.C. is developing an initiative to spur green-collar jobs by taking advantage of the city's recent passage of the new green building law and its commitment to carbon emissions. The Oakland Green Jobs Corps is a jobs training program that emphasizes green pathways. In Baltimore, they're doing something with the AmeriCorps program geared towards green construction. In Richmond, California, has established, Richmond, a program that will provide low-cost and free solar system installation to low-income homeowners. And the list goes on and on and on and on. There's a lot of good stuff, and it truly is. One of the things that ICLEA says is local governments are at the forefront of the movement to address climate change in the United States. And one of the things that I have learned over the past 15 months is how much good stuff is really going on out there. Austin, Texas has created an action plan to make all new single-family construction zero energy capable by 2015. And it goes on and on and on. And one of the things that I found is that there's already communities who are doing the reports, who are a step ahead of us, and or 2 steps ahead of us, or 3 steps ahead of us, showing how you measure, how you can see how you're doing, because that truly is a challenge. One of the things that I learned is I went to a program last year that up in there's a township in Long Island, New York, and they have, it says greening garbage trucks. And one of the things is pretty interesting is there's almost 170,000 refuse and recycling trucks operating in the U.S. It's 3 times more than there are transit buses. 99% of refuse trucks are diesel powered. One refuse truck consumes 8,900 to 10,000 gallons of diesel fuel a year and gets just 2.8 miles a gallon. Trucks in private waste hauling fleets are used for 20 years or more, and their fuel efficiency and pollution controls degrade over time. So on and on and on. This is something Los Angeles has a fleet with 252 natural gas refuse trucks. It's the largest in the nation. And I thought this was impressive. Only 14 of the 26 original fleets operating natural gas and refuse trucks in 2002. Los Angeles, California. The biggest growth has occurred in the city of Los Angeles, which grew from 10 natural gas trucks in 2002 to 252 in 2005. Pretty impressive. Los Angeles, California. This increase occurred despite a serious setback in 2004 when the entire fleet of roughly 160 natural gas trucks was temporarily removed from service to repair the source of leaks in the liquefied natural gas fueling system. And one of the things when I went to this workshop about greening garbage trucks, here it is up in Long Island, New York, a township that has just taken a huge leap. So there really is impressive stuff going on all around the country. And my hope is that we can use these ideas to try to impress our own leadership, that we can do it. If they can do it, we can do it. And that's part of the message I think we all want to get. It can be done. It doesn't have to be at the national level. It can be done right here at the local level. It's not easy, but it can be done. And I think the more that you hear about those kind of things, the more it makes you feel, well, if they can do it, we can do it. So Haverford Township adopted in September in 2008 a climate action plan, and that climate action plan was to drive our policy. That's supposed to be a policy that drives how we operate Haverford Township. So beginning in 2009, we tried to incorporate that into our thinking. And how did we reach that point? Part of it was the 5 milestone process that Brenda referred to earlier: review buildings, fleets, streetlights, waste opportunities, and then evaluate the measures, and on and on. But I think what's even more important is we went through a process where we brought in our stakeholders. We brought in our department heads. We brought in different leaders in the community. We had two parts to our plan. One was township operations, and the other was the community as a whole. So my role is township operations, how to influence township operations. And one of the things that we tried to do was take a look at and actually come up with potential goals for Haverford Township. And then we had a list of criteria. And the three that we chose were, as our top criteria for our goals, were to achieve significant cost savings through such things as energy efficiency, to institutionalize climate and protection efforts in the township and community operations through training, and position Haverford Township's municipal government to provide leadership to the community by taking action first. So out of all these possibilities, that's what we thought worked best for us. That's what we thought we had the best chance of actually doing. Some of them that did not make it were things like solidify the township as a regional and national leader in climate protection. Well, that's not going to happen, and it doesn't really matter. But we thought, let's take a look. And then the criteria we used were visibility. Is the action financially, technologically, and politically viable? Is it cost effective? Can we implement it? Is it consistent with our goals? Is it engaging? In other words, does it measure or involve multiple sectors? And can public education or publicity be tied into it? And is it timely? So when we looked at some of the things that we were hoping to accomplish, those were the things we took in mind. Is this something we can do? And again, for anybody who works in municipal government, municipal government is different than national government. It's different than state government. It's different than business. It's its own unique entity, and part of it is how to get things done in a environment or a system that changes on one hand like this, depending on the mood and the politics, and on the other hand, is very hard to change. We're sort of set in our ways. So that was a big part for us. And some of the benefits are fairly obvious: improving air quality and public health, enhancing community livability, saving taxpayer money, demonstrating commitment to climate protection. When I gave this presentation to our own Board of Commissioners, I had saving taxpayer money first. And the reason being, because I knew that's what they wanted to hear. And that's what I mean by you have to be willing to adjust and adapt. There's no sense in, this crowd here, we're probably all on board. We all believe in it. But in municipal government, what you have to do is figure out how are we going to get people to buy into this? What's a practical approach, and I think that's what we have really tried to focus on, because as we all know, sometimes it does save money, but not always. Not always. Our number one thing is we're trying to reduce carbon footprint. That's our number one thing. It's often very related, but it's not always the same. And our targets were a 20% reduction below 2005 levels by the year 2012, and 30% by 2020. And how did we come up with those? We made them up. Plain and simple, we made them up. But we said, let's shoot for it. If somebody in our stakeholders meeting said, let's go for 20%, somebody else said, let's make it 25%, somebody else said, let's make it 30%. So we thought, why not? Why not shoot for the stars? But part of it is based on what we thought was real. Part of it was based on the idea of, here's our action plan. Our action plan, I call it 4 levels of fruit. And what I mean by that is, if you think of a tree, the lowest level of fruit, that's the easiest, right? You go up a little higher, and you need a ladder, and maybe you need a cherry picker all the way up. So our first level of fruit was behavior. Doesn't cost anything. The experts estimate we can probably save 6 to 9% simply by changing our behavior. And we all know what that means. It means turning out the lights when you're not in the room. Turning off the car. Simple, simple things. Just our way of living. The simplest things is our behavior. Next level of fruit is the existing technology. What do we already have that we can make better use of? My son Chris is over there. He can do 100 more things with his cell phone than I can. Right? What do we already have in our existing technology that we can maximize, that's going to allow us to reduce carbon footprint? Some of the more obvious examples of that are things like email. Do we need to print out all these things that we send? Do we need to send these letters? Do we need to, or can we do it with our existing technology? There is a article I'd like to share with you a little bit in, I can find it. Was written up in Time magazine a couple years ago, and what it said was our biggest resource for energy efficiency is using what we already have. I just share a couple of lines. This may sound too good to be true, but the U.S. has a renewable energy resource that is perfectly clean, remarkably cheap, surprisingly abundant, and immediately available. It has astounding potential to reduce the carbon emissions that threaten our planet, the dependence on foreign oil. It doesn't pollute, unlike solar and wind. It doesn't depend on the weather, unlike ethanol. It doesn't accelerate deforestation or inflate food prices, unlike nuclear plants. It doesn't raise uncomfortable questions about meltdowns or terrorist attacks, etc. Now, this may sound too simple. However, a nationwide push to save megawatts instead of building more megawatts could help reverse our unsustainable increases in energy hogging and carbon spilling. And what it goes on to say is, we're not talking Jimmy Carter about no Christmas lights. We're saying that we have technology. We should be investing in energy-efficient technology. The Alliance to Save Energy calculates that without the efficiency gains we've made since the last energy crisis in 1973, our economy would use nearly 50% more energy today. That's more than we get from oil, twice what we get from coal or natural gas, and six times what we get from nuclear plants. It's a great article, and it goes on to say, and I want to tell you a little story that maybe sums this up. Years ago, when I got out of college, I worked at a bar. I was a cook, and I worked in the back, and there was a woman who came every day at 4 o'clock. She would come in, she'd have a couple drinks. She would leave her Cadillac running the entire time she sat in the bar, so that it would be cool when she went back out. Now think about this. With today's technology, she could drive up in her Prius, right? go in, have a couple drinks, have her remote switch, so 5 minutes before she goes back out to her car, she turns on her car, she goes out, car is cool. And what the article goes on to say is, we're not asking anybody to give up anything, you know. We are still the same hedonistic Americans, but we can significantly reduce our carbon footprint simply by using the energy efficiency that's out there and investing in that. And it's a powerful argument. It's a very powerful argument that using the existing technology is the best way. You know, President Obama got a bit of flack in his campaign when he said, check the air pressure in your tires. He was right. He was right. Simple things really do mean a lot. Third level of fruit is that small investment. Small investment, certain things, motion lights, things like that, and you'll get a small return. And the fourth level of fruit is a large investment. And what we try to do is take a look at these as our action plan and say, where can we apply what? Where is it realistic? Where do we think we have a chance to do it? And that's why we came up with those goals that we did. Okay? So what are some of the initiatives we took? Some of the initiatives we took were to create a green team. My guess is that Radnor will do the same thing. We'll create a green team. And again, my role is municipal operations. Our Environmental Action Committee, their part of this is the community, educating the community. So the green team was formed, and it's a team of employees. And the green team's job was to develop priorities, coordinate across departments, conduct outreach, develop township policies, educate municipal employees, and work with the school district. And that was more the EAC. We said trickle up and trickle down. One of the things we did is we asked each department to have one employee from finance, from codes, from each department, and just meet and just in a room like this and talk about what can we do. And I think one of the benefits of that is that the employees take ownership. You know, it's like when I was growing up, it was my old dad always saying, close the door, turn out the lights, turn down the heat, right? And we were the kids. But now what we're trying to say to the employees, not us telling you do this, but we're in this together. And if you let the employees come back to you with ideas, they will come back with good ideas. They'll look around, and they won't see them as dictates from management. Do this, as much as we're part of this. And a lot of the things, I'll just give you a couple examples. From our codes department, we are now handing out use and occupancy violation reports to the homeowner or realtor, eliminating postage, paper, and envelopes, and have ceased issuing contractor truck stickers. Just simple things like in our ice rink and the finance department. I've asked the finance department staff to keep the door closed and lights off in the computer room, saving heat and lighting. You know, just simple things, but then they're buying into it. So that's part of what we did. Some of you may have seen in this week's Inquirer, Sunday Inquirer, greening of the workplace. And it's exactly that, the whole idea of creating a green team and that they come up with ideas, look around, what can we do in this department, in this office, and how can we share those with some of the other departments? So it really is an effective way of coming up with ideas. And I think the other part of that is to continually sell the green, you know, to put out little tips, not mandates, but tips. Send out emails. You know, when you read something interesting, send it out so that people feel like we're part of this. We're teaching each other and encourage them to bring ideas that they've heard about. And that's been one of the things we've done. The other part for us is our education, as I spoke of. We did a 10% challenge, which we put in our Have a Good Times, which is our newsletter. And we tried to use that to encourage people to look around the home. Look around to see what could they do. So Have a Good Times is our newsletter. So we put things in here that, here's a 10% challenge. Here's things you can do in your home that will reduce your carbon footprint by 10%. Some pretty simple things like we've all talked about. You know, changing the light bulbs, turning down the heat 1 or 2 degrees. Just simple things that you can do. And I'm sure probably everybody in this room is better versed at that than I am. But it's just these little things that if you educate people and you find out, I can do that, I can do that. One of the things we did at our house, as my son will tell you, is our furnace broke down in late November, so we went without heat for 3 weeks. So we just sort of did a sprint at the end to save our 10%. But we have the Have a Good Times. Haverford Township Day is a big event in Haverford Township each year. We have 15,000 to 20,000 people come out. And our theme last year was, together we can paint our town green, a green-friendly town. We gave out these handsome recycling bags. And the whole idea is to try and make us feel better about ourselves, because that's important, you know. Once I can convince you that that's who you are, you say, okay, well, that's who I am. It's like with your kids, you constantly try and convince them that they're good at this or they're good at that. So they see themselves that way. And I think that's a huge part of it. We also had a green zone. We set up a whole area where people could come learn about solar, learn about our new single-stream recycling, learn about some of these things that they can do in their own home. And it was all just part of this process. Again, some of you may have seen this, National Geographic. Different things on saving energy in the home. And a big article, just fascinating stuff. But it's all out there, and I think the more that people realize, I don't have to be a scientist to do this. It's all part of what we all want to do. So that's, what is that? Let's see, shall we? Short term, some of the policy recommendations, fairly simple. No idling. I don't know how it is here, but it's sort of this macho thing to leave your car idling if you're driving a pickup truck or a cop car. And we're trying to get people to recognize that that's not a good thing. It's not necessary. So we're making policy recommendations. Shutting down a computer. Some of them pretty obvious. Long-term purchasing. That we look at all of our purchasing through the eyes of what we call ecological intelligence. And it's another article that I had seen, ecological intelligence, and again, I'll just read a little bit. When it comes to going green, intention can be easier than action. Case in point, you decide to buy a T-shirt made from 100% organic cotton, because everyone knows that organic is better for Earth, and in some ways it is. In conventional cotton farming, pesticides strip the soil of life, but that green label doesn't tell the whole story, like the fact that even organic cotton requires more than 2,600 gallons of water to grow enough fiber for one T-shirt, where the possibility the T-shirt may have been dyed using harsh industrial chemicals which can pollute the groundwater. If you knew all that, would you consider the T-shirt? Would you still buy it? And it goes on to say, this thing called a good guide, and the idea that one of the 10 top things that's going to change the world as we know it is ecological intelligence, looking at things through those eyes. I'll give you an example of that. This was in the New York Times. FedEx looked at their whole operations. And one of the things they looked at, and maybe you've seen this before, I'll read this little paragraph, it seems that sitting in the left-hand lane, engine idling, waiting for oncoming traffic to clear so you can make a left-hand turn is only minorly wasteful of time and peace of mind, but also of gas. Not a ton of gas if we're talking about just you and your Windstar, but immensely wasteful if you're talking about 95,000 big square brown trucks delivering packages every day. So what they go on to say is FedEx looked at that. They did this whole study. They used the technology of their computers, and they figured out how to redo all their truck routes and eliminate left-hand turns. And by doing that, they saved roughly 3 million gallons of gas, reduced carbon emissions by 31,000 metric tons. So it's looking at your operations in this way. And that's one of the things I think Haverford Township has done fairly successfully. Not everything, don't get me wrong, but we have done a few things. And I'll get to them in a minute. What are some of the challenges? Some of the challenges are, again, a mindset. One of the things that you hear is, what difference does it make in what we do in Haverford Township or Radnor Township if India and China and et cetera, are still doing what they're doing? It's a legitimate question. And yet, at the beginning we said local governments are doing all these great things. And so that is the way we change the world a little bit at a time. Another thing that's a challenge to overcome in the mindset is, when we put our plan together 2 years ago, gas prices were sky high. Everybody was receptive. As soon as they started dropping down again, weren't as receptive. Next thing, obviously, is money. Money's always a problem, because sometimes you have to invest the money initially, and in local government, that is a challenge. And that's fair to say. Elected leaders, their job is to try and respond to us voters, and us voters are whimsical. We forget, today what we were so worked up about 9 months ago. And so it's the same with long-term planning in local government is extremely challenging when it comes to money. If you say to today's voter, we're going to do this so that 10 years from now we're saving money, it's a challenge, and it's a legitimate challenge. Third challenge is measurement, as Josh talked about. How do you measure these things? We do have a plan. There is software available that shows you how to measure, but the challenging part is, it continues to change. The operations continue to change, so it is a challenge to get oranges to oranges. And the first thing is manpower. And the manpower to do two things: to research into some of these ideas, the manpower to look for grants, to fund some of these ideas, and the manpower to do some of the legwork that's required. That's why it's great that you have organizations like the EAC that are certainly big and important partners in all of that. Where have we had some of our successes? We've had some of our successes with our lights. We have, again, if you think of that highest level of fruit, one of the things is we have gotten a grant, as Radnor probably has also, from the Department of Energy, and we are replacing 10% of our street lights with LED lights. And that's in our action plan. We try to look at where are the big things that we think maybe we can get money to help us do, or that we are planning to do anyway. So that's a big one. Another one is our stadium, our ice skating rink, if any of you are familiar with it. We put a new roof on it. It was labeled as our biggest energy user in the township. That building needed a new roof anyway. It's 35 years old, But if you're able to do the things that you're already planning to do, but make them more energy efficient. Single stream recycling. Hartford Township was one of the leaders in recycling. Started in 1981. Very proud. And over the years, we're successful in having separated recycling. Our residents were very good at it. However, our township manager, to his credit, looked at the total picture, that ecological intelligence, and recognized that if you counted the fuel and you counted this and you counted the truck routes, that was actually, even though per ton of recycling we wouldn't bring in as much money, we would be recycling a lot more and using a lot less fuel. And of course for him, he's tying that into the money, which is fair. It's his job. And the last thing is compost, the same thing. I'm not sure what they do in Radnor, but they pick up leaves in Haverford Township. And in years past, they would drive them down to Chester, drop them off, which always struck me as kind of odd, but it's what we do because you have to do it. Now we've purchased, along with Marple, a composting machine. So we literally have mountains of leaves that we are composting. But it's saving us an enormous number of miles, fuel, et cetera, and that'll eventually turn into money. And again, it's looking at that through ecological intelligence. Usually, as I said, usually goes hand in hand with money, but not always necessarily right away or the primary reason. But it's effective, and it's been successful. Here's the numbers here. In house leaf composting, saved the township an estimated 1,000 trips to the Chester dump. The estimated mileage savings was 30,400, and obviously the fuel that goes with that. So, where are we now? Some of the simple stuff, as I mentioned before, technology. We're doing a lot more by email. We're doing a lot more in terms of what our technology allows us to do. We do have programmable thermostats in all of our buildings. occupancy sensors. I mean, this building here is new and it's gorgeous, so I'm sure all these are here. And tracking our fuel. This is a big one for us because, again, Radnor is probably already doing this, but one of the things, as Brenda mentioned, you have to measure it to improve on it. And one of the things that we are doing now, as we speak, is entering in all the data from last year, trying and seeing where we stand as compared to 2005, because that's the first step of this measurement. So that's where we are right now. And when we, there's another thing we have with our technology is we can track the different cars, and so we can see if you went this many miles, then you're sitting idling this long. And if there's a reason for that, fine. But if not, remember, so it kind of pops up. And sometimes, as you know, just by showing people, that's why we weigh ourselves, right? Just by showing those numbers to people, they improve on them. That in and of itself is a motivator. Last big area I happen to be the Director of Parks and Recreation. So a year or two ago, I was at a conference with DCNR, Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, and Michael DeBardinis, who was Secretary of DCNR, encouraged us as park and recreation leaders that we should be at the forefront of this green movement because, after all, what are we trying to do? That's what we're trying to save. We're trying to save the outdoors. And for us, so often it's the hikers, the fishermen, the sportsmen, the outdoors people. They're so closely related to what we're doing. It's all part of why we want to preserve the outdoors so we can live healthier and enjoy the outdoors. And I know I see Robin over there, and so I know Robin from Darby Creek Valley Association. It's all the same thing. So we believe that we're a natural. Parks and Recreation should be at the forefront. And one of those things is creating sustainable parks. What are we trying to do with sustainable parks? Well, one of the things we're trying to do is change people's opinion of what a well-maintained park is. It doesn't mean that the grass is cut every week and kept this high. It doesn't mean that you cut the grass all the way down to the creek. Some of these things, if there's no need to cut that grass every week, then, if you have a soccer game and all, we can see it. But if there's no need to, in the passive areas especially, well, don't cut it. It's better for the soil. You're using less fuel. Cut it maybe once every 2 weeks, once every 3 weeks. Makes sense. We're also putting in native plants and seasonal grasses that don't require that much cutting, and they're better for the soil. And one of the things, simple as it seems, is lights. Lights at parks. Lights are a huge issue when you're a Director of Parks. We have 33 parks in Haverford Township, and lights are always a big deal. With neighbors don't like them, people who use them want them. So we're putting just timers on our parks so that during certain hours, if you're there, you can turn on the lights on the tennis courts, but if you're not there, the lights aren't burning. Sounds simple, but again, it probably saves about 80% of the light, because most of the time, the lights are on when nobody's there. And it makes the neighbors happy, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what I'm going back to. I think the key to implementation, and I'll wrap up quickly, is to figure out what is going to make sense anyway, and then try and move it along by doing some of these things. The last thing is Haverford State Hospital is now Haverford Reserve. As some of you may know, as our neighbors, Haverford State Hospital, huge issue in Haverford Township. And as we now move forward with it, it has improved stormwater management. We are going after the invasive species. We're putting in solar lights. We're doing a lot of great stuff at Haverford, at what's now called Haverford Reserve. Our climate action plan is on Haverford Township website. That building you see, just as of last night, the commissioners approved to let the architect continue his work, where on the old Haverford State Hospital property was a coal power plant, will now be an environmental center where we will use it as a teaching for educational purposes, to show leadership. This is what we're doing. We hope to have solar and geothermal. We hope to have it as a teaching facility that leads by example, but is also bringing kids, bringing residents to the beautiful site that is there, and show them all the benefits and things that we were doing with that building. I'll leave you with this last thought. I was reading an article in Reader's Digest, which for me is kind of my Bible, and because of their can-do attitude. And there was an article about a woman who's Native American. She started a trucking company. She grew up outside of Detroit. And she was appalled the first time she saw an Indian reservation. She started up this company, this trucking company, and she's incorporated all these environmental components to her company. And she said, in her tradition, any decision that was made of significance, you would always think, how is this going to affect 7 generations from now? And I think that's what we're trying to do with all this that's going on in our communities, is how is this going to affect us 3, 4, 5, 6 generations from now? So, thank you for your time.
You all right with the props? You have a basketball at that. You know that, right?
I have a recycled basketball up there.
Okay, yeah. It's nice. Actually, you should have brought one for everybody.
My sister's commenting on my game.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Andrew Kreider. I work for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency in our Philadelphia office. And normally on evenings like this, where I am actually allowed to leave the office, I begin my interactions by saying the old adage, I'm with the federal government and I'm here to help, which the chuckles, right, I see the shaking heads. And obviously it wouldn't apply in this case anyway. I just wanted to first commend both Radnor and Haverford for the work that they've done, because if you've been following the politics around climate change, the last decade or so hasn't been EPA's most aggressive decade in terms of climate change. So without digging too much into history, let me just confirm that local governments really have been on the cutting edge of climate change, and these two are certainly among the regional leaders, even if maybe you don't think that you are. So thank you for the good work that you've done here. Before I get started, let me ask a quick question. I want to talk today about what individuals can do and what businesses can do in terms of energy efficiency and saving money, but by show of hands, how many business owners, small business folks, do we have? Okay. Okay, thanks. So I'll try to cover both equally. Let me start repeating a little bit of ground that Brenda already covered for us. What's a carbon footprint? That's just a really fancy way. When somebody says, what's your carbon footprint? It's a fancy way of saying, how many greenhouse gases are you responsible for emitting? And that could be your home, your car, modes of transportation that you take. And if you take it one step further and you look at what you buy and the production that goes into the products that you're purchasing, you could include that in your carbon footprint as well. Why do we call it a carbon footprint? Well, the major greenhouse gas is carbon dioxide. It's the most common gas. It's not the most powerful, but it's certainly the most common. Okay, why should we try to reduce our carbon footprint? I'm guessing if you're here tonight or you're watching, you know why. When you use energy, you emit greenhouse gases, and those greenhouse gases together are leading to climate change. Here's the secret about global warming. It is not really, no matter what they tell you, an environmental crisis. In fact, it's an energy crisis. And to go one more step toward debunking common wisdom, it's not a crisis of energy supply, it's a crisis of energy consumption. And we are big consumers in the U.S. of energy, and for that reason, I think, if not already second to China, we are still the #1 leading country globally in terms of our greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, I was once told if you're going to give a talk, the folks who are sitting there, especially when you're listening to somebody like me who's a bureaucrat from the federal government, will remember the first thing that you say and the last thing. So I'm going to put the first thing. In fact, if you pay no attention to anything else I say, here are the 3 simple actions for reducing your carbon footprint. It's not from EPA. It's actually from the chairman of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And he represents the international body of scientists who've been working on this for years. Here's what he says. And I'll throw it out there, and some of the tips are controversial, and if you want, we can talk about them toward the end. I won't even address these, really. I'm going to go off on a little EPA tangent, but I think you'll find these helpful. Number one, eat less meat. And that's it. The amount of energy that goes into producing feed for cattle, for the farms that are built, the pollution that is generated at those farms, all of those things play into climate change in quite a dramatic way. Ride a bike. Maybe it's not as easy out here in the suburbs as it would be in the city where everything is so close, but in fact, that would have been a good tip, Tim, for the woman that you referred to earlier. I mean, after a couple of drinks, she should be riding a bike, not a car, whether it's a Cadillac or a Prius. But ride a bike and buy less stuff. And I think you can probably make sense of why those are so important in terms of reducing your carbon footprint. So anyway, that's what you need to remember. Eat less meat, ride a bike, and buy less stuff. The rest of this will just be filler, till we get to the Q&A. Okay, now in keeping with the the sort of schizophrenia of federal government, I just told you to buy less stuff, and the first thing I'm going to talk about is buying more stuff. So obviously we all need our appliances. We are an incredibly technologically dependent, if that's the correct phrase, culture. We've evolved into that. And if you're going to buy products, we have to. You need your refrigerator. You need your furnace. 3 weeks. Whew. Good for you, Tim. Anyway, if you're going to buy products, there are products out there that are better than others, clearly. Energy Star, the program I work for, labels products of all different types. I don't remember at last count how many dozens of products. There's a list on our website. Check the list out. And if you're in the market for a new appliance, or if you want to invest in solar energy, if you just want a new TV, if you want to buy compact fluorescent light bulbs and want to know which ones really are the best of those, all of this information is on the Energy Star website. You can click on the category, they bring you to a list of labeled products, they'll even help you find out where you can buy those. So that's a good start if you are going to buy more stuff. I like to include a personal example, and actually I will pick on myself twice more later in this presentation to make you all feel better. Here's the first one. About, I'll say maybe 2 years ago, I got inspired. This is before, by the way, all the discounts on compact fluorescent light bulbs came out. So I went out and I spent, a bundle on compact fluorescent light bulbs for every fixture in my house. And then also engaged in some of the behavior changes that folks have already mentioned and tracked my energy use. I called up Pico and I said, could you send me, the latest and greatest in terms of my electricity consumption? And it turns out, I didn't know this, they keep on file at any time your previous 2 years of consumption data. And they put it in a fax machine and fax it over to me, and I could look at what I consumed in the previous 2 years. Well, about a year prior to that request, I'd installed all of the light bulbs. So what you have here, it's not particularly easy to read. If you look at the first incredibly tall bar, that is my electricity consumption in August of the first year. And if you go to the next sort of quarter of the bar chart, you'll see one for January of the following year, but still before I made all of my replacements. Those are the first big sections are July and August, January and February. And then look at the next, sort of the third quarter of the chart. You'll see the August of the following year. So this is where I'm proud of myself. Later I'll criticize myself, but from August the first year to August the second year, I dropped my electricity consumption by, what does it look like here? Maybe 200 kilowatt hours, which is significant. Now, here's the caveat. The weather was different the first August than it was the second. The second August was cooler. However, if you look again at the January figures, which is the last tall piece here, from January to January, after replacing all of my bulbs, I still cut my electricity consumption by more than 100 kilowatt hours that month. So those are savings. In fact, the savings were enough that I could then buy Pico wind energy and was paying still less than I would have been had I not made the change. So I think Tim and some others have mentioned the small steps you take. I said I paid a bundle for the light bulbs. I really didn't pay a bundle. Clearly they are vastly discounted now compared to what they were then, but that was a very easy, quick return step for me to take. I do want to mention too, Pico, as part of the requirements of Act 129, which is tied to deregulation, is going to roll out a program that they call the Smart Home E-Audit. And it's, I don't know how the system is going to work yet. I haven't seen it. I think it's to be unveiled this month or next. and it will help you actually work through your electricity consumption and do an energy audit of your home, and then set goals for reducing your consumption. So look for those. Okay, so I'm going to focus mostly on homes, because as you'll see later, homes, as folks have said, buildings are the big consumers of electricity and energy. Energy Star has multiple tools that are available to you if you're looking at home improvement. If you look at the middle section of this web page here, we have what's called a home energy yardstick, which is a very simple tool I'll walk you through in a minute. There's a home energy advisor. You can find energy auditors. We have a list of partner consultants and energy service companies that are on our webpage that are familiar with Energy Star and can help you do an energy audit of your home. Let's start with the home energy yardstick. Again, this and most of everything else I'll mention are available at energystar.gov, which is our website. With very basic information, you can get an idea of how your home is performing. I know you probably can't read it, so all they ask are this. What is your zip code? How many people live in your home? What's your square footage of your home? And what energy sources do you use? Natural gas, fuel oil, propane, kerosene. And then they ask you to enter your energy, your electricity consumption, and then your heating source consumption. You can do it by year or by month, and they run the numbers, and they will tell you something like this. They'll give you your ruler, and they'll tell you where you stand. Now, the 5 is an average home. The 10 is an incredibly energy efficient home. So you want to be as close to the 10 as possible. The arrow is me. One small, I guess it would be a millimeter beyond average. So now keep in mind this is after I replaced all my light bulbs. I'm glad I didn't do this prior to that exercise. It'd be a little bit more embarrassing. And if you look to, the web page doesn't just stop here and say, okay, here's how you scored. It asks you a few other questions. It will help you find an energy auditor. You can link to all of that information right here. It's a very quick, couple minutes way to get a fix on how your home is performing. And we're going to go through something in more detail in a little bit. Okay, why is now a better time than ever before to make improvements? Well, hopefully you've heard of the federal tax credits, the tax incentives that are available. I believe currently they are set to expire at the end of 2010. So if you're thinking of big-ticket items like a new furnace, like new windows or new doors, etc., this year really is, unless they reauthorize these incentives, this is the best year for you to do that. EnergyStar.gov/tax credits lists all of them. This is just one piece of the page. You scroll down and you get to all of the other information. You'll find out what the tax credits are, how much they're for, what equipment qualifies, etc. It's really a great place to start if you're thinking of any of these larger purchases. Okay, that was a quick overview of what you can do at home. We're going to come back to personal actions, but for those business owners here, what can your business do? Well, remember the 3 simple actions, again. And that's a little bit different if you're a business, but let's think of how could you interpret buying less stuff if you're a business? Well, clearly you need to buy the items that you're going to sell or that are going to help you run your business, but maybe you think of it differently. How far away are those items being shipped from? Where are you buying them from? Are you supporting other local entities? Are these materials being shipped on a barge from somewhere in Asia? Think of all of the greenhouse gas emissions that accrue with those sorts of things. But if you're a business, you have sort of a unique position. You are positioned to be an example in your community, and by being an example, you also give yourself a competitive edge. I'm one of those nerdy green shoppers that goes in and picks up on whether or not a business is paying attention to the larger environmental issues or to the local challenges that are being faced. So if you have shoppers who are attentive to that sort of thing and you engage them, I believe that will help your business. If you own your building, do either of you who raised your hands earlier, do you own a building related to your business? Okay. So certain businesses, if you own the right kind of building, I don't want to go into too much detail on this, you can benchmark your energy use. There is an online tool, kind of like EPA's home energy yardstick, but for businesses, much more useful just because it helps you store data. You can look at long-term trends in your building, and I'll show you a screen from that database in a second. Another opportunity for business owners is you can become a partner with EPA's Energy Star program, and that opens you up to various resources. It puts you in line for recognition if you do engage on environmental issues and improve your energy efficiency. There is a website on the Energy Star homepage for small businesses. If you go to the main page, energystar.gov, on the left-hand screen, you'll find a small business entry, and you've got some information there. Energy Star also, I get calls all of the time to come out and you know, something like Township, Haverford Township Day, greening events. We have really tons of incredibly well-produced, informational, kid-friendly, you know, multi-audience applicable publications. They're all for free. You can order them in bulk, and people find them useful. So the publications are available. EPA, or it's energystar.gov/publications. And to go back to the buildings and plants, if you own your own building and you have one of these types, you can engage EPA's Energy Star Portfolio Manager system to benchmark your energy use. Schools, offices, hospitals, some of the larger ones you can read down at the bottom, wastewater treatment plants and courthouses, retail establishments, houses of worship and financial centers. Really, I think 12 or 13 different types of buildings can benefit from this tool. This is what it looks like. It's called Portfolio Manager. The quick operation on this is, if you have 12 to 13 months of energy use data, that's your electricity, your fuel sources, and you enter it into this system, it will give you a rating for your building of 1 to 100. If you score above 75, you are eligible to receive a label for your building. It's an Energy Star label, much like the blue one you see on appliances. And you can get recognition for that. You get a profile on our webpage. You can nominate yourself for an annual national award from EPA and go to DC and get all sorts of kudos. And I'm available in my office to assist with this, and we have a host of other people that can help with it too. It's free. It's confidential. I will never know, unless you ask me to help you, how much energy your business is using, whether or not you're doing well or not, whether or not you scored a 75 or a 16, like somebody I did help once input their data. The whole idea is you get a general sense of how your business is performing, and you get tips on how to improve. Here's some information on becoming a partner with Energy Star if you're a business. Unfortunately, it's not an option available to homeowners and individuals, but businesses can, and local governments as well, can benefit from that partnership. Okay, so I want to take you through what I found to be the best way to quickly estimate your carbon footprint. I do have a handout out front. I'm actually going to show it on the screen, and then I'll make sure everybody gets a copy today. And actually, I'll also leave copies here in the Township building for folks who are viewing but unable to be here in person. I do have to give thanks to Mount Airy Greening Net, which is the organization that produced this document, and you can also obtain it on their website. So here's what it looks like. Looks a little familiar, right? I mean, you've all done taxes. They've made this kind of neat to use. They call it the CO2 EZ as opposed to the 1040 EZ. And this is the 2008 version. I don't think that they've updated it for 2009. And here's what they look at. I think they look at 3 key categories: your transportation, your electricity, and how you heat your home. I think instead of walk you through this form, I'll take you again through my experience. I guinea pigged myself. So here's the form in short. Transportation. Obviously, your car is a big emitter of greenhouse gases, correct? They ask you how many miles you drove last year. It's an easy number to figure out. There are tips actually on the back of the handout that help walk you through this, just like your tax forms. The instructions are a little more brief and perhaps more user-friendly. All of your mileage goes in. You divide that by the average number of miles per gallon that your car makes, and you get a total. And you multiply that by the pounds of CO2 per gallon of gas, and you come up with the pounds of CO2 that you are responsible for. So in this example, last year, I was responsible for my own personal driving, 7,540 pounds of carbon dioxide. That's from my car. Now, I did the same thing for my wife's car because, of course, they want the entire home accounted for. And my wife drives less, and she drives a more efficient car, so she has bragging rights. She only was responsible for 4,160 pounds of carbon dioxide. Next, they ask you how many miles of air travel did you take in the past year? Well, luckily or unluckily, I'm not sure how to look at it, we didn't go anywhere by plane last year, so that was a 0. And then you add up your transportation. So together as a family, our car travel amounted to 11,700 pounds of CO2. I know these are a lot of numbers, but in the end, you'll see where we're going. Then you look at your utility bill. So you're done your transportation, look at your utility bills, and start with your electric bill. How many kilowatt hours of electricity have you used? This is the easiest one to come up with. Every pico bill you get, it will give you a total, I think on page 2, bottom right, a little chart, which will show you the average temperature of that month, currently, the month, the previous year, and what your running total average is for the last 12 months. So in the last 12 months, we used 5,500 kilowatt hours of electricity. You run the conversion, and that's another 8,250 pounds of carbon dioxide that my home was responsible for. And then you look at your heating, and these are where the numbers increase. If you have natural gas, you can put your information in there. If you have heating oil, like we do, you put your information in. We went through probably 900 gallons of heating oil last year, and when you do the calculation, that's 22,500 pounds of carbon dioxide. So you can see immediately that just heating our home was twice as much in terms of greenhouse gas emissions as all of our car travel added up. So that's why when people talk about building efficiency and homeowner efficiency, that's a big deal, is how you heat your home. So add up your car and plane travel, your electricity and your heating, and you're left with your grand total emissions. In my case, 42,000 and some odd pounds of CO2. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, they have you convert that into tons, and the number that I was given was 19.3 tons. So I flipped over my form, and this is what it looks like. Like I said, I'll make sure everybody here gets a copy, and then we'll leave them at the building. The U.S. household average is 20 tons. So I'm right basically there, 19.3 versus 20 tons. I've got an average home. I'm not sure that's, again, anything worth bragging about. Some other interesting statistics on this. The average Philadelphia household emits 15.7 tons. And the target that Mount Airy Greening Net sets for sustainability, what they say, in fact, this is a good question. I'll ask you, what do you think the target for sustainability is? If the average is 20 generally, and in Philadelphia it's 15.7, what do you think the 0 is one guess, okay. Okay, 10's another, and you're going to say 6. 15, okay. What they say your target should be if you want to be sustainable is 3.3 tons. So clearly I've got some work to do. In most cases, probably the rest of you do as well. But it's a very interesting form. In fact, they run you through credits. I mean, like I said, this is like doing your taxes. If you're an avid recycler, you have a credit here. You can subtract some pounds of emissions. If you're a vegetarian, subtract emissions. If you do composting, etc. That's a great way to get started. And I think maybe it was Tim who mentioned energy efficiency really being the number one way. It's a number one renewable source of energy. And the cheapest source of energy is the energy you never use in the first place. So my job is all about energy efficiency. I know it's not as exciting and glamorous as a windmill or a solar panel, but I often like to say when I'm talking to people, don't think about this as an environmental issue. I mentioned at the beginning it's an energy issue. It's actually a financial issue too. I mean, and with the economy the way it is now, I know that fuel prices have dropped from not that much actually from their high. You can really, I don't want to say very easily, but without too much effort, save money in your home and by altering your driving habits. And in fact, I think, again, Tim said it pretty well with the triangle that he had. The Energy Star program has estimated that no cost and low cost changes in the way that you consume energy can reduce the price you pay for energy, your overall costs, by up to 30%. I mean, that's money that currently we're just throwing away. So, being more efficient really may not be as flashy, but it's certainly the easiest thing to do in the short term. So that, I believe, is all for me. I have my name and number here, my email address. I'm happy to answer questions with the rest of the panelists afterwards. And just to close, I know I did say, remember the first thing I said. I know you've all got the 3 simple actions down. The last thing I want to say is, The federal tax incentives are available now, at least through the end of this year. If you're thinking about making improvements to your home, now's the time to do it. PECO, I don't think I explained this fully, is unveiling a number of discounts and rebates as part of the Act 129 process that they're in. If you go to Home Depot, you'll see all the compact fluorescent light bulbs are sort of front and center, and the price is already discounted. PECO is subsidizing the cost of those light bulbs, so if you haven't bought your bulbs yet, do it now while somebody else is helping pay for it. And the last thing, too, Pennsylvania is about to unveil a raft of rebates for, I believe, appliance purchases, for some of the same stuff. I don't know the specifics on what Pennsylvania will provide rebates on, but those are on their way to coming out, too. So 2010 looks like a good year to become more energy efficient. All right, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew and Tim and Josh. I think all of the presentations are a good way for us to see that there's so much that we can do, and it's not really as complicated as it might seem at first. There's a lot of resources out there to help us through identifying what our impacts are and then taking us to the next step to reduce our impacts. Does anybody have any questions for any of the presenters? No? Yes, Robin. Can you come up to the microphone? Because otherwise I won't be able to hear you at home. Thanks. Either one.
I just had a question about the Energy Star rating system, because I was actually looking at refrigerators, and it's by class, right? And the class would be like the size and such. So I'm just curious as to whether there's some thinking about going in the direction of encouraging through the rating system more reasonably sized appliances.
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, it's difficult for the Energy Star program, and a lot of people have a misconception that they will provide the Energy Star label for the most competitive products. But in fact, the goal of the program is to move the market as a whole toward greater efficiency. So they actually want to label, in this case, refrigerators in a larger class so that you're at least buying the most efficient in that class. Now, I know that's not exactly the best answer, but the program does continually review the specifications that they use to label all of the appliances and other things that they look at. So, and in fact, I should say, too, in case you haven't seen it, there has been criticism recently that so many products are Energy Star labeled. If you look at, for example, televisions, I think was one category where some incredibly high percent, maybe greater than 70% of TVs were Energy Star labeled. That is a valid criticism of the program, but also reflects its success in that things have become so efficient over the years that so many more people now qualify their products for Energy Star. However, the program needs to also keep up and make it more difficult to obtain the label. So I think it's you know, we kind of have to walk the line between promoting strictly the most efficient, but then also trying to promote those within those larger categories to become as efficient as possible. And unfortunately, people like big refrigerators. So to the extent that we can engage those folks to buy the most efficient big refrigerators, the better. But you're right, you know, the point to be made too is the most efficient big refrigerators probably are going to be nowhere near as efficient as the smaller ones just because of their size. They're consuming more energy. So that's something for people to keep in mind.
That's a good point. Are there any other questions?
Yeah.
Heather?
Thank you all. One question I had for you, Andrew, was just, I loved your 3 points about riding a bike, being a vegetarian, and buying less stuff. And I was wondering, I work a lot with the schools, and are there good websites or information, especially about purchasing? And I think that's something that people haven't really started to consider, like what would be the 10 questions you ask yourself when you're going to buy something?
Are you thinking purchasing like as an institution, a school making big purchases?
No, I'm thinking more in giving information to parents and families, and also in the community. We do a lot. I'm on the EAC here in town, but what to put on our website, just for in general, there's the question, gosh, is mail order better? Is it worse? Is it the packing?
Right, right. There probably are a lot of good websites, and unfortunately I can't think of one now. There are simple things to remember, like if you're buying something locally, well, then you don't have to worry about the shipping, because the shipping and the packaging is where all of that comes in. It's certainly something I could look into.
And also, is there anything also when you talk about buying locally that you could find a good argument for shopping locally? Like we have a lot of shops here in town, and environmentally, kind of why is there?
Oh yeah,
similarly?
no, for sure. And in fact, there's an organization in the city of Philadelphia that is geared entirely around, and I don't remember the name of it at this point, but it's geared entirely around supporting the local businesses. And I believe the title of it is something. That's it, the Sustainable Business. I knew the word sustainability was in it. Sustainable Business Network. And the idea is you're buying locally, you're supporting your community, and then all of the ripple effects that go with that. You're not buying something at I'll be careful how I say it, but you're not buying something at a store that imports its goods from a country, that you have to use barges to get products from. So I can get you more information on that because I think that's a good model to follow. And even in my hometown, I live outside of Phoenixville, and there's an effort there with the retailers to promote them, their destination as a shopping destination as opposed to the nearest mall. You can find all of the same things here, and you can go for a walk outside, and we've got all the same items. Why not come here and support your neighbors?
Right. And that reminds me of another question is, do you know of any townships that are doing anything, giving some kind of, there's the Energy Star partner for EPA, but have you heard of anyone, kind of how you said as an educated consumer, you go in and kind of feel them out to see how they're handling things and whether you're going to shop there. Have you ever heard of any townships kind of coming up with a system for ranking people, or they can give them bragging rights, something they could put in their window, or say, I'm an 8,
Oh, I see. You mean like a local government ranking of certain
like if
businesses?
Radnor wanted to, give recognition to people using wind power, not using plastic bags, getting a new furnace, or not buying, shopping locally. Just if there was kind of a 10-point system and they could get a point for each one.
Yeah, I have not heard of that, of a local government actually going through and rating businesses based on their environmental footprint. I don't know if anybody else has.
Yeah, we haven't done anything that specific in Haverford Township. One of the things we did do as part of Haverford Township Day was recognize businesses and people in the community who are leading by example. Matter of fact, Jan Marie was one of our Green Friendly Award winners. I think I might have a little thing that we had given out to those people. And we also, again, it's still in the implemented stage, but our 10% challenge was almost to go through what Andrew was saying, and then part of the discussion was as a way of recognizing residents who had met that 10% challenge by, putting their name on a list or some kind of a recognition as part of that. So it's not as specific as you mentioned, but it is that kind of idea, is trying to recognize them. And I don't know if this is helpful to you, but this article that I read on ecological intelligence, the source that it has is called Good Guide, and I think it's exactly the type of thing. It says Good Guide has an iPhone app that can deliver verdicts on tens of thousands of products. Good Guide and services like it let us align our dollars with our values easily, says this guy Goldman who puts it together. So I think it's goodguide.com.
So it's Good
Yeah,
Guide.
I actually have that app, and it's pretty fancy. It's not right on your phone, and you can scan the barcode of whatever product you may be looking at, and then it'll give you information about the company, and then I think there's a red, yellow, and green lights, so you know which category it falls into.
Thank you.
One quick follow-up. Sorry, one quick follow-up to that. You mentioned that businesses can benchmark themselves and receive an Energy Star award if they're better than 75% of their peers. If I'm not mistaken, there's something similar for homes, isn't there, for Energy Star?
Yeah, there is an Energy Star. Energy Star homes are labeled, but it's an entirely, well, I shouldn't say it's an entirely different process. There is no portfolio manager equivalent. There's no benchmarking equivalent. A lot of the Energy Star Homes activity takes place at the beginning, prior to the home being built, and the home is built to certain efficiency specifications and then becomes labeled, and that's usually done, then the builder markets the home as an Energy Star home. However, there are ways for existing homes to obtain the label. It's a lot more difficult sometimes than obtaining it, when you're building a home from the ground up.
Yeah, that answers my question. And
Okay.
it seems like a shame a little bit because most of our housing stock is existing.
Right.
And we should encourage people to fix up rather than tear down and rebuild. It's probably more efficient to do that anyway.
Yeah.
And so the yardstick is a nice tool that you can track your own progress to say, okay, well, my home right now is a 3.4, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing how my new geothermal system will improve that next year. And I'd love to be able to show that off by saying, geez, I have a better improvement than most people in the country, and I can be awarded for that, or
Right.
some way of recognizing people's efforts on their existing structures seems
Yeah.
to be very important.
No, I think you're right, and not that this will get at the recognition, but I think that that the tool that PICO is unveiling is going to help people sort of go beyond the yardstick and do a better type of energy audit of their home. And I had something else very wise to say, but it just it flew out. So I'll wait, and if it comes up again, I'll add that to my answer. Thanks.
Great. Anything else? Robin?
I just wanted to ask about, and actually there's another question for Andrew, on lighting, which is a lot of the electricity use in a house. The focus has been on switching out to compact fluorescents
right.
or other low-energy bulbs, but my understanding is that there's really not been much focus on dimming and other lighting performance, lighting, occupancy sensors, that kind of thing. Does EPA rate the lighting control equipment for residential uses, and is that something to consider?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I'm not entirely sure how involved they get in the fixtures. The question I thought you were going to ask, I'll answer that one since I don't know the answer to the first one, is where do LEDs fit into this? And I think, Josh, somebody had mentioned that there had already been a conversion to LED lights, and my sense is Energy Star is a bit behind. We do promote LED holiday lights, but we have not been, the Energy Star program hasn't been as aggressive in promoting LEDs, which really are the next generation,
Right.
and go even beyond compact fluorescence. So, but it's funny because folks who talk about this, folks like us who talk about this every day, know about LEDs, and we know about compact fluorescence, but there's this whole sort of general public who doesn't talk this language all the time, and they're just, coming to compact fluorescent light bulbs. So, yeah, I think that there are continual improvements in lighting, obviously. Our program is struggling to keep up with those. My best suggestion, other than talking to me later, is to check out the lighting page on EnergyStar.gov and see what you can find there.
Okay.
I don't think that you're going to get much in the way of promotion of different kinds of fixtures.
Well, I guess I would just say that I think it's a real opportunity for public education. The bulbs are still pretty expensive.
Oh, yeah.
But the way people use them, and even some of the switches are
Right.
becoming much more affordable and could actually help people reduce their energy consumption, without going. We tend to go to the bright, shiny objects, and that's kind of my point.
Right. No, I think that makes sense too. You're right. And that should be. I'll mention that the next presentation I give.
Great.
How's that? All right.
Great, thank you. Heather?
I had a question for Haverford Township. What is your primary, for public education, just, Robin had reminded me of that. What is your primary way, thank you, big word, way for doing that? Is it through the internet? Do you do materials?
Yeah, I think it's a sort of a combination. We have our EAC, similar to Radnor. They've had a number of programs like this, not quite like this, but of people coming in, businesses and people coming in and explaining what they're doing. So that certainly is one part of it. Another part of it is we do, as I mentioned in our Have a Good Times, we have each issue we put out something along the lines of just promoting simple stuff, like what Andrew was mentioning about the things you can do real simply in your home, to try to educate people, especially to make them realize that it's fairly simple. We do have stuff on our website that we put up on a regular basis in the township's website, just to try and help people understand.
So on the website, is there kind of a
green board kind of a
just
thing.
somewhere that they could go, that it's
That's correct.
kind of keeps everything that's been in all the different publications?
That's what we try and do, yeah.
Great,
That's
thank
part of it.
How often do you send out your Have a Good
Have a Good
Times?
Times 3 times a year.
Okay. And it's a hard copy publication, goes to all the residents?
That's correct. We actually, we also give you the option of greening out. If you don't want it, it's on our website. But yes,
Okay.
we do send it out to all the residents 3 times a year.
Okay. Great.
Another thing we promote is this green book, just simple ideas that you can do in your house, things like this that you can measure. It shows you very simply, I have it upside down, it shows you very simpler power tips for conserving energy in your house, and it shows you some of the things that Andrew's mentioned. Here's what your refrigerator uses, here's what this, and here's ways that you can reduce it by doing simple things. So just little things like that. I think the key, I believe, and I'm not the expert that Andrew or anybody else up here is just to try to make it seem simple. That it's simple. It's not things that you have to know the science of it. It's like driving your car. You just have to know how to turn it on. And it's really a lot of it is that. And I think energy efficiency is the key thing. Is just to make people understand that a little bit better.
I did remember my wise
Good,
contribution.
good,
It's
okay.
come back. Maybe it's not so wise now, but back to Josh, what you'd said. There's been an experiment with several utilities. I don't think any in our region in the Mid-Atlantic, but certainly out in California and elsewhere, where they have, and maybe you've heard of this, they've used the utility bills for each customer as a way to let them know how they're doing as compared to their neighbors. So you might get your bill one month and there'll be a smiley face with a note that says, you're performing or you're consuming X amount less than most of your neighbors, and maybe you don't get a smiley face that month. And maybe this goes to what you're saying, make it easy for people to understand and to act on. And they found that even just the smiley face, and we're talking a pretty simple, this is not sophisticated, you either get a smile or a frown. People move when they get that. And I think that was coming back to when you put your geothermal system in, you're going to be happy if you get your smiley face, but somebody else who you bump into frown is going to say, well, no, wait a second, I had a smiley face last month. I need to up my performance here, which I think would be great to see, to have PECO and some of the other, I work in the whole Mid-Atlantic, so some of the other utilities in the area, I think that would be a real help, both to encourage people and then to sort of give them the sense of satisfaction when they've done something right.
We've talked about that at the EAC, generally speaking, about adding a little competitive factor to this might kind of get people engaged.
Yeah. Baltimore has a great, they're calling it the Baltimore Neighborhood Energy Challenge, where they actually have blocks of people competing against each other. And the utility is providing data to a website where individual homeowners' consumption I don't think is up there, but your block is. And each block has a captain who goes around and says, have you put your CFLs in? Have you sealed your home or whatever? And that's it. It actually, before it even began, people were really excited to get involved. And I think the City of Philadelphia just engaged in a smaller version of that as well. The competition works, and people respond to that.
Want that smiley face.
Yeah, yep.
Anything else?
Just a quick announcement. Tomorrow evening at 5:30 at Rosemont College over in Bryn Mawr. The gentleman you see in that larger photo with his dog, Larry Gibson, a great activist from West Virginia, will be speaking, and you'll see the other end of why we really need to reduce our energy consumption because of what the coal industry is doing to the people of Appalachia, beyond what it's, not just what it's doing to the rest of the world, but how the people there are really suffering under the yoke of the coal industry. So I encourage people to come out there. Some sheets on the back table have some information on that program, and hope to see you out there. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you all for coming. We appreciate your being here and your attentiveness. And I want to give another special thanks to our guest speakers tonight. We really appreciate you making the time to join us.
Thank you.